Is the dollar being devalued by stealth? That old trilemma, the economic consequences of President Trump. The flack is thickest over the target. Is the dollar being devalued by stealth? Who knows? Monica has taken the dialogue from the post previous to this one, and here's the output. Here's part one of your text, formatted for voice-to-text conversion, ensuring it flows smoothly without links but retains all the quoted material in full. The flack is heaviest when you're over the target. Andrew Bailey calling for closer EU ties. Mark Carney is now Premier of Canada. Christine Lagarde is being touted as a possible replacement for Klaus Schwab at the WEF. Is President Trump providing a dead cat for the dead cat bounce of globalist authoritarian command and control? May the 30th, 2017. Salience, relevance, differentiation, and the polling booth. A Crosby Show blog zine. The NHS, fairness, immigration and people, Brexit, an end to austerity are the relevant and salient issues I get from the data. Applying an analysis with the lens of Linton Crosby's 4 elements in campaigning, namely salience, is it out there? Relevance, do the people give a shit? Is it personally relevant? Differentiation, they say that too. Political differences, where's the change? Why change? The point of sale execution, making the lies stick, connect the policies to the party. Crosby says, if in doubt, believe in something. If you're losing, then get someone else to do the dirty work for you. Surrogates, negative campaigning. Opponents are attempting to undermine the Brexit case. The flack is heaviest over the target. This from Robin Tilbrook in May 2019. It has been interesting over the last few weeks to see a rise in attacks on the English Democrats and on myself, and also on anybody who has supported us over our case to have the High Court declare that the UK left the EU at the expiry of our notice on 29th of March. Initially, some opponents tried to suggest the case was simply hopeless. Nigel Farage was one of those, saying on his LBC show that the Constitution was so vague and that the judges are so doubtful that the case had no hope. Since he said that, he has come fully out with the Brexit Party Limited, in which he seems to be the sole shareholder and is a joint director with Richard Tice. I found it odd that Nigel should say that. Hasn't his behaviour over the leadership of UKIP and recently in his attacks on UKIP shown all too clearly the nature of Nigel Farage's character, especially when you consider it was UKIP that gave Farage his platform, not the other way around? August the 6th, 2022. Re-establish sovereign money creation. There is no science the study of which is more useful and commendable than the knowledge of the true interest of one's country. And perhaps there is no kind of learning more abstruse and intricate, more difficult to acquire in any degree of perfection than this, and therefore none more generally neglected. Hence it is that every day we find men in conversation contending warmly on some point in politics, which although it may nearly concern them both, neither of them understands any more than they do each other. Thus much by way of apology for this present inquiry into the nature and necessity of a paper currency. And if anything, I shall say, may be a means of fixing a subject that is now the chief concern of my countrymen in a clearer light, I shall have the satisfaction of thinking my time and pains well employed. To proceed then, there is a certain proportionate quantity of money requisite to carry on the trade of a country, freely and currently, more than which would be of no advantage in trade, and less, if much less, exceedingly detrimental to it. This leads us to the following general considerations. Benjamin Franklin. The sectoral balances approach to aggregate demand is a tautological accounting identity. Explication of the magic money tree is my simple aim. I've written longer poems on political economy and about energy-based calibrations of the unit of account and value. Usually Hell's man's fuel, man's oppressor, Ties of the Dollar Moon and Bourgeois Resolution and Globalization Unentangled all explore these areas. I've also written a novel titled Conquest of Dough. Money, credit and debt in quotes from some well-known names. Talk about centralization. The credit system, which has its focus in the so-called national banks and the big money lenders and usurers surrounding them, constitutes enormous centralization and gives this class of parasites the fabulous power not only to periodically despoil industrial capitalists, but also to interfere in actual production in a most dangerous manner. And this gang knows nothing about production and has nothing to do with it. Karl Marx. There is a certain proportionate quantity of money requisite to carry on the trade of a country freely and currently, more than which would be of no advantage in trade, and less, if much less, exceedingly detrimental to it. Benjamin Franklin. Money and goods are different. Most confusion in economic thinking arises from a failure to recognize this fact. Goods are wealth, which you have, while money is a claim on wealth, which you do not have. Thus, goods are an asset, money is a debt. If goods are wealth, money is not wealth, or negative wealth, or even anti-wealth. They always behave in opposite ways, just as they usually move in opposite directions. If the value of one goes up, the value of the other goes down, and in the same proportion. Carroll Quigley. A powerful apparatus. The powerful apparatus equals transferring from one state pocket into another such remarkable real values as Soviet rubles, current accounts expressed in gold rubles, and how they are made up. 90 to 98% are revenues from the state trusts, i.e. the same official bits of paper and the same bureaucrats. At present, the state bank equals a bureaucratic paper game. There is the truth for you. If you want to hear not the sweet communist official lies, with which everyone feeds you as a high mandarin, but the truth. Lenin. Discussions of value, fluctuating prices, the gold standard, changing interest rates, items of pecuniary wealth, which are at the same time items of debt, are merely discussions looking towards a readjustment of the factors which prevent them. The problem of analysing political choices against the metric of a monetary measure is that money as a thing is most certainly a variable, and like any good technologist, scientist or metrologist will tell you, a unit of measurement has to be clearly defined and fixed. The dollar, he notes, that it is a variable. Why anyone should attempt on this earth to use a variable as a measuring rod is so utterly absurd that he dismisses any serious consideration of its use in his study of what should be done. Technocracy Pamphlet, 1933. The monetary and financial system of an economy are part of the socio-politico-economic control mechanism used by every state to connect the economy with the polity and society. This neural network provides the administrative means to collect taxes, direct investment, provide public goods and trade. The money measures provide a crude but serviceable basis for the accounting system, which in turn, along with the codification of commercial law and financial regulation, are the basis for economic evaluation and the measurement of trust and fiduciary responsibility among the economic agents. A central feature of a control mechanism is that it is designed to influence process. Dynamics is its natural domain. Equilibrium is not the prime concern. The ability to control the direction of motion is what counts. Money and financial institutions provide the command and control system of a modern society. The study of the mechanism, how they are formed, how they are controlled and manipulated, and how their influence is measured in terms of social, political and economic purpose, questions not in pure economics, not even in a narrow political economy, but in the broad compass of a political economy set in the context of society. Martin Shubik. The most hated sort, and with the greatest reason, is usury, which makes a gain out of money itself, and not from the natural object of it. For money was intended to be used in exchange, not to increase at interest. And this term interest, which means the birth of money from money, is applied to the breeding of money, because the offspring resembles the parent. Wherefore, of all modes of getting wealth, this is the most unnatural. Aristotle. Do not have two differing weights in your bag, one heavy, one light. Do not have two different measures in your house, one large, one small. You must have accurate and honest weights and measures, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God has given you. For the Lord your God detests anyone who does these things, anyone who deals dishonestly. Deuteronomy 25:13-16. Dr. Adrian Wrigley, Tax Banking Paper, Principles of Tax Policy are Economic and Political. National success can only be sustained with a sound system of taxation. Sound taxation must be based on policy principles, thoroughly understood by those in power to maintain it. These must be based on an understanding of the economic principles underlying taxation. Equally important is an understanding of the political principles behind taxation. Here's part 2 of your text, formatted for voice-to-text conversion, ensuring it flows smoothly without links, but retains all the quoted material in full. Grub Street in exile. A deck chair attendant's lament Whistey's Titanic tales. Here's a comment on a discussion on Gail Travberg's Our Limited Earth, or whatever it's called. I'm no longer interested in your advertisement for your work after having done you the honour once only to find that your main thesis is trash, as I summarised to you previously and for which you had no direct rebuttal. If you want to just engage in argumentation like the rest of us here, rather than be lazy, poorly socialised, copy and paste hound, then that would be great. I didn't evade your ERI questions asking for empirical proof. Apparently you didn't understand my response, and there can be no empirical study of the ROI of oil plays because there is too much complexity and only circumstantial evidence to work with. That was not me being evasive, that was me telling you that you're asking the wrong question. When faced with genuine adversity, only babies say, "This is my last response to you, and I'm a baby magnet. You came in hot calling us a cult, and now you're facing some competition because of it. Deal with it." On what planet does a 42% import tariff make up for a 30% devaluation of the entire currency, and the global reserve currency no less? Pull yourself together. My response. It would be very nice if you could advertise some of your own work, perhaps more than a few observations cobbled together in a haphazard fashion. Substack is supposed to be a newsletter for writers to advertise, promote, and even get paid for their work. Here's an advert for my work. I do not place anything which I put on here behind a paywall. The Conquest of Dough website, there's a link. On the Going Direct Paradigm Mind Map, there's a link. And then there's a blog which I put up on the Going Direct blog, which I set up in 2023, the last post of which was in December 2024. So this about the book Super Competent Democracies by Roy Madron. This book proposes that our societies will have to become super competent democracies in order to learn how to manage the immensely complex challenges and threats that we are facing. The purpose of the book is to explain why and how supercompetent democracies have to emerge so that our societies can become increasingly just and increasingly sustainable. The world we live in and depend upon is immensely complex, and so are the problems, the threats and the challenges that we face. Because they are complex, they cannot be solved with the lavish application of technological ingenuity and human resources as we can with simple problems such as building a bridge, or complicated problems such as putting a man on the moon. As David Snowden and Mary E. Boone said in a Leaders Framework for Decision-Making, Harvard Business Review, November 2000, complex problems involve large numbers of interacting elements. The interactions are non-linear, and minor changes can produce disproportionately major consequences. The system is dynamic, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and solutions can't be imposed, rather they arise from the circumstances. They emphasize that tackling complex problems requires a deep understanding of context, the ability to embrace complexity and paradox, and a willingness to flexibly change leadership style. Indeed, by treating complex problems as if they were simple or complicated, leads to the emergence of disastrously chaotic outcomes, of which there are multitudes of florid examples at every level from the local to the global. By contrast, By applying ensamples of supercompetencies, complex problems can be dissolved, as the great management cybernetian Stafford Beer says in Decision and Control 1966. All of the supercompetencies we can use to dissolve the complex ecological, economic, social and political challenges and threats we are facing have been tried and tested and rigorously evaluated over the past 50 years or so. However, while learning how to dissolve those problems, we will also have to dissolve three great ideological obstacles to their implementation: neoliberalism, managerialism, and elitism. The anti-human, anti-nature, and anti-democratic systems that have been created by these three ideologies are herding the whole of the human family and much of the natural world to the brink of chaos and extinction. Why and how these ideologies combine to present a lethal danger to the future of the human family and the natural systems on which we depend is detailed in the first half of the book. The why and the how of supercompetent democracies will be detailed in the second half. I made a video series interviewing Roy Madron about that book, the Supercompetent Democracy series, which can be found on YouTube. Episode 1, Meet the Combatants. Episode 2, The Neoliberal Thought Collective. And Episode 3, The Dropping of the Pennies. Democracy is that institutional arrangement for arriving at political decisions in which individuals acquire the power to decide by means of a competitive struggle for the people's vote. Joseph Schumpeter. The Great Inanition, a paradox of plenty in the age of going direct. In the manner of G.K. Chesterton, there is something peculiarly fitting that in the year of our Lord 2019, when the great minds of BlackRock conceived their going direct plan, they should have chosen a phrase that so perfectly captures the paradox of our age. For in going direct, we have achieved the remarkable feat of going nowhere at all, save perhaps in ever decreasing circles, like a snake consuming its own tail, in the ancient symbol of the Ouroboros. It is a curious thing, and one that would have delighted the medieval schoolmen, that in an age of supposed abundance we should find ourselves discussing inanition, that most technical of terms for the most basic of wants. When Boris Johnson, that peculiar mixture of classical scholar and modern huckster, spoke of the inanition of truth, he stumbled upon a great truth that perhaps he knew, for we are indeed suffering from a great inanition, not merely of truth, but of everything that gives substance to human society. Consider, if you will, the magnificent absurdity of our situation. We have created financial instruments so complex that they can only be understood by machines, yet we cannot seem to feed the poor. We have developed digital currencies that can cross the world in microseconds, yet we speak earnestly of going direct, as if the very complexity we have created must now be bypassed. The great joke is that in attempting to make everything more efficient, we've made it impossible for anything to work properly at all. The going direct paradigm, that clever child of BlackRock's imagination, is rather like a man who, finding his house too cluttered, decides to solve the problem by removing all the doors and windows. The efficiency is undeniable, there are now no barriers to movement, but the house, curiously enough, has ceased to be a house at all. And here we arrive at the heart of our paradox. The very systems designed to create abundance, the ETFs, the digital currencies, the carbon credits, have instead created a new form of scarcity. It is as if we had invented a machine for making bread that worked perfectly well, except that it required us to stop eating altogether. The carbon currency endgame, that peculiar marriage of environmental concern and financial engineering, presents us with perhaps the ultimate Chestertonian paradox. We're trying to save the world by creating a new way to count its destruction. It is rather like trying to cure a man of gambling by giving him an infinite supply of poker chips. But the true genius of this system, and here we must doff our caps to the architects of going direct, is that it has managed to make scarcity itself into a commodity. The less there is of something, the more valuable it becomes. Thus we have achieved the remarkable feat of making poverty itself profitable, at least for those who own the right sort of financial instruments. Pierre Omidyar, that unknown oligarch who became known precisely by funding those who would expose other oligarchs, represents perhaps the perfect symbol of our age, like a character from one of the more satirical passages of The Man Who Was Thursday. He funds both the revolution and the counter-revolution, the exposure and the cover-up, the transparency and the opacity. And so we find ourselves in this curious position where everything is going direct, yet nothing seems to arrive, where we have created abundance through scarcity and scarcity through abundance, where the very tools designed to democratize finance have instead created a new feudalism, all the more perfect for being digital. The great irony, and Chesterton would have loved this, is that in our attempt to make everything more efficient, more direct, more, quote, smart, unquote, we have created a system so Byzantine, and it makes the actual Byzantine Empire look like a model of simplicity. We have, in short, achieved inanition through excess, emptiness through fullness, and poverty through wealth. And perhaps that is the greatest paradox of all, that in an age where everything is supposedly going direct, we've never been more lost in the labyrinth of our own making. The end.